The genetic analysis proves that the individual they are labeling as Thomas's rightful heir is not his biological child whatsoever, and the exact individual Thomas consciously chose to trust his lifetime legacy to is sitting right in that chair. I stared intently at the whiteboard layout. I possess no desire to completely destroy my father. Then we focus our attacks exclusively on Eleanor and Julian, Diana responded reassuringly. Arthur's true level of complicity will emerge entirely naturally during the formal proceedings. If he merely cooperated passively under duress, the court will absolutely take that reality into account. She paused briefly, locking eyes with me. However, Clara, you must be fully prepared. When this matter advances to a formal hearing, absolutely everything comes out into the open. The financial fraud, the stolen property transfers, the DNA secrets, and your father will be sitting exactly 10 feet away from you. I am fully aware, I stated. Are you absolutely certain? The silver pocket watch ticked steadily inside my blazer. Grandfather's letter explicitly demanded truth, not personal revenge. I am completely certain, I affirmed. Eleanor appeared unannounced at my apartment on a Wednesday afternoon. No advance phone call, absolutely no warning whatsoever. Just her sedan idling in the lot adjacent to the dry cleaning business and a sharp, aggressive knock echoing on my front door. Julian was sitting in the front passenger seat, leaving the vehicle engine running. I opened the door. Eleanor was wearing fresh lipstick and a heavily rehearsed facial expression. Concerned, maternal. The exact public face she put on for local neighbors and court notaries. Honey, I recognize this situation has been incredibly stressful on all of us. However, your father and I genuinely believe it is best if we manage the estate assets together as a unified family. Margaret Caldwell is currently managing grandfather's legal affairs, I stated flatly. Eleanor's facial expression shifted instantly. The attorney's name struck her exactly like a freezing blast of winter air. She successfully recovered her composure in roughly 2 seconds. It was truly an impressive display of deception. Margaret retired from active practice years ago, she asserted smoothly. She absolutely did not, I corrected. Eleanor immediately attempted a completely different psychological angle. A concerned tilt of her head, accompanied by a softened vocal tone. Your grandfather would never want expensive lawyers tearing this family apart, Clara. He always maintained that family must come first. Grandfather is the exact individual who retained the lawyer, I responded coldly. The practiced maternal expression slipped away entirely. Underneath it emerged something incredibly hard and intensely bright, exactly like the edge of a steel blade catching the light. You possess absolutely no conception of what you are unleashing, she hissed. I comprehend exactly what I am unleashing, I stated, closing the door. I watched from my window as she marched back to the sedan. Julian leaned across the console to say something urgent. Eleanor angrily shook her head. Julian immediately initiated a phone call as they aggressively accelerated out of the parking lot. I turned back to face my kitchen table. 2 massive banker's boxes packed with records, 47 pages of expert forensic accounting, a certified handwriting specialist's formal report, a legal DNA laboratory analysis, and a written letter from a deceased man who built solid houses and kept his promises. Exactly 3 days later, I received my official court date. 2 weeks prior to the formal evidentiary hearing, Diana and I systematically reviewed our exhibits one final time. 47 pages of comprehensive bank records, 11 distinct documents bearing forged signatures, land transfer records featuring completely fraudulent notarization, fabricated tax forms displaying vendor entities that did not exist, Raymond Mitchell's sworn affidavit detailing 28 months of structured financial transactions, Dr. Carol Fenton's expert handwriting analysis, Kevin Rudd's formal deposition transcript, the genetic laboratory certification, featuring an unbroken chain of custody, our neighbor's detailed affidavit containing 4 pages of direct observations from a woman who had monitored my family's movements from across the road for 31 years, and grandfather's personal letter fully authenticated by Margaret, who was prepared to testify live. Diana intensely coached me for the witness stand. You are not stepping into that courtroom to argue, she instructed firmly. You are stepping in to read a balance sheet. Do precisely what you execute every single day at your corporate job. Maintain a completely calm voice, deliver clear answers, and point directly to the physical exhibit. Allow the pure numbers to speak for themselves. My corporate managing director called me later that week. There is significant chatter circulating through the town, Clara, she informed me. People are asking major questions regarding your family. The community was remarkably small. For degrees of separate connection at most, perhaps merely 3. Word traveled through church committees and hardware shop checkout lines far faster than any official legal filing could ever reach the courthouse records department. Eleanor had retained an attorney named Philip Brock, a local, highly aggressive lawyer notorious for executing intense estate challenges. He immediately filed a formal motion to dismiss our actions, boldly arguing that the trust framework had been created under severe undue influence executed by me over grandfather during his concluding years. I read through the text of the motion sitting at my kitchen table. Undue influence executed by the devoted granddaughter, who physically changed his bed linens, warmed his daily broth, and filed his annual tax returns while his own son's wife was siphoning his bank accounts. Diana remarked, "He is completely reaching out of desperation." The trust framework was originally established 15 years ago, when Thomas possessed the physical strength to swing a framing hammer. A certified physician's letter explicitly confirms absolute mental competency at every single update. Then allow him to reach, I responded flatly. Our neighbor phoned me on a Sunday afternoon immediately following church services. "Honey, Eleanor has been actively telling community members that you are aggressively contesting your grandfather's ultimate wishes, claiming that you are desperately trying to steal the family home out from underneath your own parents." I immediately started to clarify the facts. "That is absolutely not. I am fully aware it is not true, dear," she interrupted gently. "I personally watched you drive out to that residence every single day for 3 continuous years. Winter, summer, even during that horrendous ice storm back in February. I never once spotted Eleanor present at the house." She paused briefly. "However, I did spot her on exactly 2 occasions. Both times she arrived carrying heavy file boxes and exited the premises completely without them. And on one specific occasion, I spotted your cousin Julian out in the yard with a professional measuring tape actively walking the property boundary line." Our neighbor was 74 years of age. She had served as a local school administrative secretary for 30 consecutive years. The exact caliber of woman who noticed instantly when a child wore the identical shirt 2 days in a row, or a parent signed the incorrect name onto a school permission slip. She missed absolutely nothing. "I would genuinely like to offer live testimony if it assists your case," she stated firmly. "I may be advanced in years, but my eyesight operates perfectly fine and my memory remains sharper than most." Diana immediately added her name to our official witness list. A character witness to validate the caliber of caretaker I had been, and a timeline witness to establish the exact nature of the covert activity Eleanor and Julian were conducting at the homestead. Exactly 2 days following that call, Julian phoned me directly. It represented the absolute first time we had spoken since the funeral service. "Cousin, do you genuinely intend to advance this action? Reflect deeply about Uncle Arthur. Reflect about the secrets that will enter the public record." There it was. The explicit threat. He foolishly assumed I remained completely ignorant regarding the DNA secrets. He believed it represented ultimate leverage, that the overwhelming fear of Arthur's true origin being exposed to the community would compel me to fold my case completely. "I have reflected deeply upon it, Julian," I stated calmly, and disconnected the line. Julian had just played his absolute final card. He possessed no conception that I was currently holding the entire deck. The night preceding the scheduled pre-trial conference, Arthur phoned my line. His voice sounded incredibly rough. Late-night rough, the distinct kind that develops from heavy whiskey consumption, intense weeping, or a combination of both. "I possess no capacity to stop her, Clara," he whispered hoarsely. "I am fully aware of that, Dad. If this matter advances to an open courtroom, absolutely everything comes out into the light. Everything. I am fully aware of that reality as well." A long, agonizing silence stretched across the line. I could distinctly hear his heavy breathing. Somewhere in the background behind his position, a residential door clicked shut. Eleanor, most likely siphoning her way through the house that did not belong to her. He was fully aware of the truth, wasn't he? Arthur uttered quietly. Your grandfather. He knew the truth about my origin. I had mentally prepared myself for a wide array of courtroom scenarios. I had intensely practiced my financial testimony alongside Diana. I had thoroughly rehearsed the presentation of our physical exhibits. Yet I had absolutely not prepared for my own father asking me at 11:30 at night if the extraordinary man who raised him was fully aware he was not his biological son. He was fully aware, I answered softly. And he consciously chose you regardless. The silence stretched out indefinitely. I distinctly heard Arthur set an object down onto a hard surface. A drinking glass, most likely. I am completely undeserving of that grace. Perhaps you are. I responded honestly. But he granted it to you regardless. That represents the exact caliber of man he was. He disconnected the line without offering a single promise. No commitment to offer live testimony, and no commitment to halt Eleanor's legal actions. Merely the sudden click of a dead line, followed immediately by the faint, distant sound of his utility truck engine igniting in the background, which indicated conclusively that he was sitting out at the historic office building again, drinking all alone inside a structure bearing his father's stenciled name on the glass. I sat silently on the edge of my mattress inside apartment 3B. The silver pocket watch resting on my nightstand ticked away steadily. I did not sleep a single wink that night. Instead, I audited the financial numbers one final time. Not because I required any further confirmation, but simply because pure numbers represented the only thing on earth I could truly trust, and human beings lately were absolutely not trustworthy. The formal pre-trial conference was scheduled for 9 o'clock the following morning at the County Circuit Court. Whatever path Arthur ultimately chose to walk, I was determined to be present. County Circuit Court. Courtroom 2. The Honorable Judge Martha Hensley presiding. Mid-50s, completely no nonsense. The exact caliber of magistrate who thoroughly reviewed every single legal filing before the gavel even struck. Philip Brock opened the proceedings on behalf of Eleanor. He stood confidently at the central lectern with his shirt sleeves rolled up, his vocal delivery meticulously calibrated to project deep sympathy. Your Honor, this asset trust framework was originally executed during a distinct window when Thomas Vance was incredibly vulnerable. His granddaughter, Clara Vance, functioned as his absolute sole caretaker, and enjoyed completely unrestricted access to a senior citizen suffering from progressive neurological decay. We firmly believe the trust document reflects severe undue influence, rather than Thomas Vance's authentic desires. Diana immediately stood up to respond. Absolutely no dramatic theatrics. Your Honor, the permanent trust framework was originally established 15 years ago when Mr. Vance was 70 years of age, completely mentally competent, and actively operating a highly successful construction enterprise. The document was formally witnessed by 3 entirely independent parties and fully notarized. It was updated exactly one time, 2 years prior to Mr. Vance's passing, during a thoroughly documented window of absolute mental competency explicitly confirmed in writing by his primary attending physician. We hold the physician's official certification right here. She elevated the thick exhibit binder. We are fully prepared to present the original trust instrument alongside extensive, undeniable evidence of massive financial irregularities in the management of Mr. Vance's assets executed by the petitioner. Judge Hensley looked directly over her spectacles at Brock. I will absolutely require a direct examination of the original trust document at the formal evidentiary hearing. I am also hereby ordering both legal parties to immediately deliver a comprehensive, unedited financial accounting of any and all estate assets they have personally accessed, transferred, or actively managed over the course of the past 3 years. Brock visibly hesitated. Behind his position, Eleanor leaned forward aggressively and began whispering urgently into his ear. Brock cleared his throat. The petitioner would vastly prefer to limit the scope of discovery. Full financial accounting, Counselor, Judge Hensley interrupted coldly, from both sides. The formal evidentiary hearing is officially scheduled for October 14th. The look that crossed Eleanor's face the exact moment the judge ordered the mutual financial accounting represented the absolute first structural crack I had witnessed in her armor. It was minor, a sudden tightening around the perimeter of her eyes, her jaw setting half a degree firmer, but I recognized it instantly. It was the exact facial expression of a corporate target whose hidden books had just been officially targeted for an audit. I learned the details of what transpired next exclusively through subsequent court filings and formal deposition transcripts. Julian phoned Eleanor the exact night following the pre-trial conference. "They are going to systematically extract the public property records," he stated urgently. "My name is permanently stamped on the notary chain. Kevin's name is stamped directly on the notary chain. This situation is absolutely no longer a mere civil disagreement, Eleanor. Hold your composure. We will simply assert that Thomas authorized every single transaction verbally." She responded coldly. Verbal authorization coming from a man suffering from advanced neurological decay, who lacked the physical capacity to hold a pen? That narrative is absolutely not going to fly in court. Kevin Rudd, the notary, Julian's close associate from the corporate office, made his own independent phone call within 48 hours. Not to Julian, but straight to an elite criminal defense attorney. Kevin's legal representative contacted Diana, offering what litigation lawyers formally term full cooperation. Kevin was prepared to deliver a comprehensive sworn statement confirming that Julian had explicitly instructed him to notarize the property transfer documentation, completely without Thomas Vance being physically present. In direct exchange for this testimony, Kevin demanded absolute legal assurances that the Commonwealth attorney would formally consider his proactive cooperation when determining criminal charges. "He is officially flipping," Diana informed me over the phone. "Julian's own notary is going to testify under oath that the signatures were completely forged." Julian immediately drove out to the homestead. I can easily visualize the tense scene based on the details Arthur later articulated. Julian pacing aggressively across the kitchen floor of grandfather's house. Eleanor standing rigidly at the counter. Arthur sitting silently at the table. "You explicitly stated this plan was entirely straightforward," Julian uttered angrily. "In and out, absolutely nobody gets hurt." "Absolutely nobody was hurt," Eleanor responded coldly. "We represent the immediate family. That money was always rightfully supposed to be ours." "Clara represents family as well," Julian fired back. Eleanor slowly picked up her coffee mug. "Clara is a bitter bookkeeper with an axe to grind." Arthur spoke up quietly from his seat at the table. "She is our daughter." Eleanor offered absolutely no response to his words. She simply sipped her beverage and immediately shifted the conversation back to the scheduled hearing date, exactly as though the word daughter represented a minor calendar entry she could easily schedule around. Law offices of Diana Walsh. Exactly 1 week prior to the formal hearing, we executed a final, meticulous walkthrough of every single piece of evidence we intended to present to the court. The original permanent trust document, 15 years old, completely ironclad, featuring certified physician validation of mental competency at every structural update. Raymond Mitchell's comprehensive 47-page forensic accounting affidavit, flawlessly tracing $420,000 siphoned directly out of Thomas's accounts into Eleanor's control. 11 distinctly forged authorization documents accompanied by Dr. Carol Fenton's expert handwriting analysis, concluding definitively that the signatures were entirely inconsistent with Thomas's authenticated penmanship. Public property transfer records proving 2 prime land parcels valued at $420,000 were shifted into Eleanor's name utilizing completely fraudulent notarization. Kevin Rudd's sworn statement confirming he notarized the transfers without Thomas being physically present. Julian's corporate commission records exposing $42,000 in direct payments siphoned from Vance Family Holdings LLC. The official DNA laboratory findings featuring a certified, unbroken chain of custody. Our neighbor's detailed affidavit, and grandfather's personal letter fully authenticated by Margaret, who was prepared to offer live testimony. Diana closed the thick binder. "This is absolutely no longer a mere legal case," she stated with a confident smile. "This represents a comprehensive financial audit armed with a judicial gavel." Margaret would offer live testimony regarding the creation of the trust and Thomas's explicit directives. Raymond Mitchell would systematically present the granular financial analysis. Dr. Fenton was fully available via live video deposition. Our neighbor had meticulously pressed her finest church garment and informed me she would be occupying the front row of the gallery. I lightly touched the silver pocket watch secured inside my blazer. It felt remarkably warm from my own body heat, the exact way it used to feel warm when nestled inside grandfather's pocket. "Let's advance," I stated firmly. The formal hearing commenced on a crisp Tuesday morning in October. The maple trees lining the highway were turning a deep, vibrant red. The exact honest shade of red that emerges only when the autumn nights turn cold enough to strip away absolutely everything a tree does not fundamentally require. County Circuit Court. Courtroom 2. Rich wood-paneled walls, harsh fluorescent lighting fixtures, an American flag that desperately required a good ironing. The exact caliber of room where everyday property disagreements and intense custody battles played out every single Tuesday morning while the rest of the community went to work. On the left side of the room sat Diana Walsh at the counsel's table, with me positioned directly beside her. The handmade cedar chest rested prominently on the table surface, officially entered into the record as Exhibit A. Margaret Caldwell sat directly behind our position, her silver hair perfectly styled, wearing gold spectacles, her hands folded serenely on her lap. Raymond Mitchell sat right next to her holding 2 duplicate copies of his financial report. On the right side of the room sat Philip Brock, a yellow legal pad resting in front of him, his pen constantly clicking. Eleanor sat directly next to him dressed in a sharp navy blue garment, her posture completely rigid, wearing her classic pearls once again, the identical pearls from the memorial service, as though a respectable reputation could be worn exactly like a piece of jewelry. Arthur sat at the very far end of the defense table, his face the color of gray ash. He stared intently at the natural wood grain of the table, and completely refused to look up. Julian sat in the absolute front row of the gallery spectators, positioned closest to the exit door, his foot bouncing nervously. Our neighbor occupied the second row, wearing her finest church outfit and bifocal spectacles, sitting as remarkably straight as a wooden fence post. A local news reporter sat nearby with a notebook open on her knee. For community members I recognized from grandfather's funeral were scattered across the back rows. Not a packed, chaotic courtroom, but an intimate setting, which made the reality far worse for the individuals harboring dark secrets to hide. Judge Hensley entered the room. We stood in unison. She took her seat. We sat down. This is officially the evidentiary hearing in the matter of the estate of Thomas James Vance. The petitioner is Eleanor S. Vance. The respondent is Clara A. Vance, appearing through legal counsel. Diana immediately stood. Your Honor, we would like to initiate our case with the original trust instrument. Brock was up on his feet instantly. The ultimate validity of any alleged trust framework is precisely the reality we are here to challenge today. Judge Hensley looked directly over her glasses at him. I will hear the legal instrument first, followed immediately by your formal challenge. Proceed, Miss Walsh. Diana immediately called Margaret Caldwell to the witness stand. Margaret testified with absolute clarity for 40 continuous minutes. She detailed the original creation of the trust 15 years prior at Thomas's explicit request, fully funded by the liquid profits generated from selling Vance & Sons construction alongside decades of highly disciplined investment strategies.
Entièrement permanent.
Clara Vance designated as the absolute sole beneficiary. Thomas was 70 years of age at the exact time of execution, and a certified physician's letter confirming complete cognitive and legal competency was physically attached to the original document. 3 entirely independent witnesses, Margaret's senior paralegal, a corporate bank officer, and Thomas's long-term personal accountant, had all formally signed the parchment. Brock stood up to execute his cross-examination. Isn't it an undeniable fact that you possess a distinct financial interest in the ultimate outcome of this trust? Margaret's verbal response was incredibly precise. I function as the designated trustee. My operational fee is explicitly established by the legal instrument itself, at a structured rate formally approved by both the beneficiary and the court. I possess a profound fiduciary interest, Counselor, absolutely not a personal financial one. Brock sat back down. Diana immediately called Raymond Mitchell to the stand. The digital projector hummed to life instantly. Raymond's massive spreadsheets filled the large courtroom screen. Columns of dates, specific dollar amounts, bank account numbers, and fabricated vendor names. He methodically walked the court through 28 months of structured transactions. $342,000, siphoned directly out of Thomas's personal banking assets into 3 distinct accounts controlled exclusively by Eleanor. $78,000 routed straight through Vance Family Holdings LLC. Fabricated vendor entities that failed to correspond to any legally registered business entity in the state. Tax forms generated entirely on a residential computer, with digital metadata timestamps perfectly matching the electronic device registered to Eleanor's personal email address. 17 individual charges explicitly labeled as medical insurance processing fees that absolutely no insurance framework had ever levied. Then came the stolen property transfers. Dr. Carol Fenton's formal video deposition played clearly across the courtroom monitor. Her final conclusion was intensely clinical. The questioned signatures are entirely inconsistent with known authenticated exemplars. The distinct tremor patterns present in all authenticated samples from the identical time period are completely absent from the questioned documents. In my professional evaluation, these signatures were absolutely not produced by Thomas J. Vance. Kevin Rudd's sworn statement was then read aloud to the court by Diana. Mr. Julian Vance explicitly requested that I notarize the property transfer documents. Mr. Thomas Vance was absolutely not present. I was informed he had signed the documents earlier at his home. I did not execute any verification. Julian's face turned completely drained of color. He whispered something urgent to Brock, who completely ignored his comment. Eleanor sat entirely rigid, her jaw locked tight, her hands clasped together so fiercely that her knuckles had turned entirely white. Judge Hensley slowly removed her reading spectacles and locked her eyes directly onto Brock. Counselor, does your client wish to offer any response to these profound accounting discrepancies? Brock stood up and nervously straightened his necktie. We require additional time to thoroughly review the forensic data. You have possessed exactly 30 days, Counselor, Judge Hensley interrupted flatly. Diana stood up once again. Your Honor, we possess one additional piece of critical evidence highly relevant to the petitioner's legal standing before this court. The petitioner's entire case rests squarely on the assertion that Arthur Vance, as Thomas Vance's only son, represents the rightful primary heir, and that Ms. Clara Vance, as a granddaughter, holds a fundamentally subordinate claim. She handed a sealed folder directly to the court clerk. This represents a certified DNA analysis performed exactly 18 months prior to Thomas Vance's passing, executed at his explicit request through his personal attending physician. The legal chain of custody is flawlessly documented. Diana read the summary text aloud. The scientific analysis concludes with 99.98% mathematical certainty that Arthur Allen Vance is conclusively not the biological child of Thomas James Vance. The entire atmosphere of the courtroom shifted instantly. Our neighbor's hand went straight to her mouth in shock. The news reporter's pen stopped moving entirely. In the gallery rows, one of the retired carpenters from grandfather's building crew slowly shook his head, the exact way you do when a dark reality you half suspected turns out to be absolute fact. Arthur did not explode in anger. He did not stand up to protest. He did not deny the reality whatsoever. He simply sank deeply into his chair exactly like an old building settling into its foundation. Both of his hands went completely flat onto the table surface. His face turned the absolute color of old weathered cement. And then he uttered the words almost entirely to himself, quietly enough that the court reporter was forced to lean forward to capture the audio. He knew. He always knew the truth. And he still kept me as his son. For one profound second, the courtroom turned completely still. I looked intently at my father and recognized something I had absolutely not expected to see. Not the weak man who signed legal documents without reading them. Not the detached man who stood behind the mesh screen door, while I carried a heavy cardboard box to my car. I saw the young boy Thomas Vance had consciously chosen to raise as his own flesh and blood. The boy who had spent his entire existence desperately trying to earn a secure place he already possessed. Then Eleanor fiercely grabbed his arm. "Do not utter another single word." And the profound moment broke entirely. Brock scrambled desperately to recover. "Your Honor, the DNA evidence is completely irrelevant to legal inheritance rights. Under state law, a child raised by a parent possesses the exact same legal standing regardless of biological relationship. This evidence is a pure distraction." Diana nodded in agreement. "We agree entirely, Counselor. We are absolutely not arguing that Arthur Vance possesses no legal standing. We are demonstrating conclusively that the petitioner's fundamental characterization of this family, that they represent Thomas Vance's sole legitimate heirs, and that Clara Vance is an outside manipulator who took advantage of a sick elderly man, is fundamentally and malevolently dishonest. Thomas Vance knew the absolute truth regarding Arthur's parentage. He made the conscious choice to raise him regardless. He also chose over a 15-year window, operating with absolute legal competence, to entrust his lifetime legacy exclusively to the one individual who proved she genuinely deserved it, not through biological blood, but through human conduct." She turned her body to face Eleanor directly. The petitioner did not care for Thomas Vance. She did not visit his home. She did not feed him his meals, read him the daily news, or balance his corporate accounts. What she actively executed was forge his signature, manufacture completely fictitious vendor entities, structure financial transactions to systematically avoid federal reporting thresholds, and file a completely fraudulent probate petition under a sworn oath. Eleanor could no longer contain her rage. She exploded onto her feet before Brock could physically stop her. "This is completely ridiculous. That girl sat inside his house and methodically turned him against his own son. She is a mere bookkeeper. She deserves absolutely nothing. Mrs. Vance, sit down immediately," Judge Hensley commanded coldly. Eleanor refused to take her seat. Her vocal pitch rose even higher. "She poisoned his mind against us. She took complete advantage of a sick old man who failed to comprehend what he was doing." I spoke up. I absolutely did not raise my voice whatsoever. I utilized the exact same calm, analytical tone I employ when reading serious audit findings to a corporate client who already knows the numbers are incredibly bad. He didn't feel sorry for me. He felt sorry for you. Eleanor stopped talking instantly. Her mouth remained wide open. Absolutely nothing came out. The courtroom turned completely silent, save for the rapid scratching of the reporter's pen and the steady ticking of the silver pocket watch resting against my ribs. Judge Hensley stated firmly, "Sit down, Mrs. Vance. I will not issue the directive again." Eleanor sank back into her seat. Her hands were visibly shaking. Not like Arthur's hands. Not with deep grief or profound shame. They shook with pure, unadulterated rage. The exact brand of fury that emerges when the false narrative you have been telling yourself for 30 years gets read straight back to you by a professional who checked the receipts. Judge Hensley issued her formal ruling directly from the bench. The permanent trust framework was completely valid, established during a fully documented window of mental competency, properly witnessed by independent parties, and entirely legally binding. The property transfers were declared completely null and void based on forged signatures, fraudulent notarization, and a severe breach of fiduciary duty. She formally ordered full financial restitution of all misappropriated funds. Furthermore, she officially referred the criminal evidence packages directly to the County Commonwealth Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation. Brock did not file an appeal. Eleanor sat completely motionless while the judicial ruling was read into the record. Julian was already long gone. He had quietly slipped out of the courtroom doors during the intense DNA testimony and had not returned. The main hallway outside the courtroom smelled heavily of floor wax and old radiators. I was walking slowly toward the exit doors, holding the handmade cedar chest securely beneath my arm, when I heard rapid footsteps echoing behind me. "Clara!" I stopped walking. Arthur stood exactly 3 feet away from me. His necktie was completely loosened. His eyes appeared intensely bloodshot. "I signed exactly what she told me to sign," he whispered, his voice cracking violently on the word sign. "Every single paper, every single form. I failed to ask what they actually were. I simply signed them. Why, Dad? I inquired flatly, because she explicitly stated that if I refused, she would immediately tell the entire community about me, about who I genuinely am. I looked intently at my father. Grandfather knew the truth, Dad. He always knew the truth, and he never once stopped calling you his son. Arthur broke down completely. Standing right there in that public courthouse hallway beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, in front of a water fountain, and a bulletin board advertising upcoming jury duty, my father wept openly for the absolute first time since I was a small child. I did not step forward to hug him. I did not offer instant forgiveness. However, I did not turn around and walk away either. I simply stood there quietly holding the wooden chest grandfather constructed, until he was entirely finished. That specific interaction represented the absolute last time we stood inside the same room for a very long time. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office moved with immense legal efficiency. Eleanor was formally charged with the severe financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult under State Code Section 18.2178.1, alongside felony forgery, and obtaining substantial funds via false pretenses. She ultimately agreed to a formal plea arrangement, an 18-month suspended prison sentence, 3 years of strictly supervised probation, and full financial restitution of the $420,000. Absolutely no active jail time, but a permanent felony record that would follow her through every single background check for the remainder of her natural life. Julian was formally charged with felony forgery and criminal conspiracy. His plea arrangement resulted in a 12-month suspended sentence, accompanied by the permanent surrender of his professional real estate license. His wife filed for divorce before the formal sentencing hearing even convened. Kevin Rudd permanently lost his official notary commission and was legally barred from seeking reinstatement for a 10-year window. Arthur cooperated fully with the criminal investigation. He was not charged with any crime. The Commonwealth Attorney officially determined that his involvement was entirely passive. He had executed the signatures under severe emotional duress, and his proactive cooperation directly assisted in building the ironclad case against Eleanor. He permanently moved out of grandfather's house and relocated into a modest studio apartment on the western side of the town. He formally filed for divorce. The last update I received indicated he was working standard maintenance shifts at a self-storage facility, right off the interstate highway. The family home was officially returned to the trust control. The 2 land parcels were fully restored. I chose not to move into grandfather's house. I retained my modest apartment, the 600 square foot space situated directly above the dry cleaning business, the exact place that was entirely mine before any of this madness initiated. Exactly 6 months following the court hearing, I utilized a portion of the trust assets to officially establish the Thomas Palmer Community Foundation. The core mission was entirely simple: providing full scholarships for trade school students residing in the Shenandoah Valley, focusing on carpentry, electrical work, and plumbing. The exact honest labor grandfather believed in with all his heart. The initial class consisted of 8 excellent students. The foundation's main office was established inside grandfather's old workshop building off the main highway. I had the space completely renovated. New electrical wiring, updated plumbing systems, and a fresh coat of paint applied to 3 of the walls. The 4th wall I deliberately left completely alone. Original wood paneling, heavily scuffed and stained from decades of labor, still carrying the ghost scent of sawdust deep within its natural grain. Arthur and I do not speak. It represents absolutely not an issue of active forgiveness, and it represents not an issue of active punishment. It is simply distance. Some doors close entirely quietly. Eleanor and I share a permanent restraining order. Some doors require heavy locks. Our neighbor attended the formal foundation grand opening. She brought along a beautiful lattice-top peach pie, and wore the exact same church garment she had worn to the courthouse hearing. She stood quietly in the center of the active workshop, looked intently at the 8 trade students sitting in folding chairs, and said softly, "Your grandfather would be immensely proud, Clara." I smiled and responded that he would likely say I severely overworked the operational budget. There is a silver pocket watch resting on my office desk now. Sterling silver, worn incredibly smooth from decades of time. It sits directly next to the handmade cedar chest on the shelf behind my chair, inside an active workshop that smells beautifully of fresh paint and ancient wood timber. Grandfather wrote the reality in his final letter, and I am going to articulate it one final time for everyone listening. Blood doesn't make you family. What you do when nobody's watching does. I did not merely inherit $20 million. I inherited an absolute standard of human integrity that represents my true story: one handmade wooden chest, one incredibly stubborn accountant, and a grandfather who constructed things designed to last even long after he was gone. If this narrative reminded you to immediately verify exactly who holds the legal power of attorney over an elderly person you love, please take that reality as an absolute sign. Execute the check this week. And if you know someone in your life who desperately needs to hear this truth, please share this video immediately. Thank you sincerely for being present here. Drop a reflection below, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you all inside the very next narrative.